Whoa! Whoa! Oh, sorry, historians. I was just watching the latest horror movie about a terrifying cult. You know, it's always intrigued me how one person could control a group of people in the way a cult leader can. As an outside observer, it's scary to think that a group of people would have every aspect of their lives controlled by an eccentric leader with too much power, who promises that only they know what's best for the group. It's even scarier when leaders like that are able to take over an entire country, and not just any country, but a large one with a massive military. This horror movie scenario was the reality for over 100 billion people when Joseph Stalin took control of Russia, as he would go on to create a cult of personality, or a situation in which a leader is idolized and revered by a society. Previously, we learned the definition and key characteristics of totalitarianism. Today we'll discover how Stalin used totalitarian methods to seize power and control every aspect of life in the Soviet Union. We'll use the following questions to guide us along the way. How did Stalin use totalitarian methods to maintain his power in the Soviet Union? How did Stalin control every aspect of life in Soviet society? And how did Stalin's economic policies impact the Soviet population? We'll also investigate the big picture question, are dictatorships inherently dangerous to society and their citizens? We last saw Stalin as he climbed to power after Lenin's death and crushed any opponents who stood in his path. As Stalin's name suggests, the Man of Steel ruled the Soviet Union with an iron fist as a police state. Before we dive in further, take a moment to pause the video here and write down what you remember from your last lesson about the definition of totalitarianism. Yeah, totalitarianism is a form of government in which an authoritarian leader controls all aspects of both public and private life. Stalin controlled every part of his citizens' lives through fear, manipulation, and force. He used tanks, armored cars, and other advanced machinery to crush any sign of rebellion. A key component of his reign was his carefully crafted secret police force. Stalin's secret police were known as the NKVD, an acronym of Russian words that translates to People's Commissariat for Internal Affairs, and later as the KGB, the Committee for State Security. The NKVD and KGB were responsible for monitoring and suppressing political opposition, carrying out surveillance, and implementing Stalin's policies of repression and terror, including mass arrests, deportations, and executions of those deemed to be enemies of the state. Citizens were constantly under heavy surveillance, with secret police monitoring phone lines, censoring mail, and planting informants throughout the country. Stalin even relied on children to tattle on their own parents, leading to the quick arrest of family members for any criticisms of the government spoken inside the home. Millions of average citizens whom Stalin deemed traitors were executed during the Great Purge, Stalin's campaign of terror aimed at eradicating anyone who questioned his authority. This included thousands of Bolsheviks from his own party who supported him and had participated in the 1917 revolution. An estimated 8 to 13 million Soviet citizens were killed, and soon Stalin had solidified his total power over the state. Can you imagine living in a society where you could be arrested or executed at any moment? Pause the video here and answer the question, how did Stalin use totalitarian methods to maintain his power in the Soviet Union? Stalin's role as totalitarian dictator relied on his ability to strictly control the large Russian population. One of his major tools for control were gulags, or Siberian work camps, where he incarcerated over 18 million people during his reign. Stalin's secret police would often arrest, execute, or exile any person deemed in opposition to Stalin. Often these people were shipped to the brutal gulags and never seen by their families again. How do you think citizens felt when their family members would disappear without a trace? The Siberian sub-zero winters, horrific working conditions, harsh punishments, and regular executions led to well over 1 million Russians losing their lives at these camps. Another key method of control was media censorship. Media was controlled by the state with propaganda, newspapers, films, and radio programs, all aimed at glorifying Stalin's achievements. Major censorship was imposed on artists, writers, and musicians. Authors like Viktor Shalamov and others who wrote haunting tales of their times in the gulags and the Soviet Union had to smuggle their work out of Russia for it to be published, or wait decades after Stalin's death to release their tales. Stalin also controlled the population through indoctrination. Education was controlled by the state, with Stalin's government controlling preschool through graduate school. In these spaces, students, young and old, were indoctrinated with the virtues of the Communist Party, including the importance of self-sacrifice and hard work. Professors and teachers who questioned Stalin's interpretation of history were severely punished, and state-supported youth groups were created with the goal of raising future party members. Stalin also wanted to rid Russia of religion in place of communism, thereby controlling yet another aspect of his citizens' lives. The League of the Militant Godless, a state-sponsored atheist group, was aimed at attacking religion. The Russian Orthodox Church was the primary target of persecution, with historic churches and synagogue buildings destroyed and countless religious leaders executed. Pause the video here to reflect on the question, how did Stalin control every aspect of life in Soviet society? In addition to controlling society, Stalin created economic policies that changed the lives of many Soviet citizens. Stalin overhauled Russia's economy by instituting a command economy, where the state assumed control of all economic decisions. Government officials identified Russia's economic needs and chose how to fulfill them. Stalin's main goal for the Soviet economy was to rapidly industrialize it so that it could outproduce any European power. To do this, he created his 5-year plan. His plan imposed exceptionally high quotas aimed at increasing the output of steel, coal, oil, and electricity, but severely restricted the production of consumer goods in order to meet these goals. Russians faced severe shortages in food, clothing, and housing as a result. Under Stalin's regime, the Soviet government seized control of more than 25 million privately owned properties, including farms, and transformed them into state-run collective farms. This policy displaced many rural citizens and significantly disrupted traditional rural life, as individuals were forced to work the land collectively for the state rather than as independent landowners. The government also greatly increased the use of modern machinery on these collective farms, which replaced and reduced the need for laborers. The Kulkas, the wealthy peasant class, resisted collectivization. They protested the policy by killing livestock and burning crops. This contributed to the food shortage in the Soviet Union, and as a result, 5 to 10 million peasants died. Despite protests, almost 90% of all peasants lived on collective farms in just a matter of years, and wheat production had doubled. However, Stalin exported much of the wheat from the farms for profit, so many Russians continued to face starvation. Under Stalin's economic policies, women began to play a larger role in the workforce. The Bolshevik Revolution declared men and women equal, and Stalin's push for industrialization and modernization of the Soviet Union required women to join the labor force. Women primarily worked in factories and construction, and the state provided childcare for all working mothers. Women also gained educational opportunities and access to careers in engineering and science. However, despite working full-time, women in Stalinist Russia were still expected to become mothers and take care of the household as their patriotic duty. Let's pause the video here and answer the question, how did Stalin's economic policies impact the Soviet population? Stalin's dictatorship caused immense suffering for the Soviet people through the use of brutal secret police organizations, surveillance, censorship, and food shortages, despite his claims of creating a communist utopia. Stalin was able to use totalitarian means of control to turn Russia into his own cult of personality, where citizens either followed him with high praises or suffered horrible consequences. His rule is a reminder of the dangers of dictatorships and the importance of protecting the rights and freedoms of citizens. History can teach us important lessons about this world today and help us become better global citizens who can improve the future. Why? You know, because history is everywhere.
Hey!